The brain food we buried. Why did Pharma want us to forget? Hello, my friends. Welcome back to Golden Garden. If you're here, you're probably someone who feels most alive with soil on your hands, someone who finds peace in tending pots on a balcony, coaxing blooms from a backyard bed, or watching a seedling push through the dark soil like a small miracle. You're the kind of gardener who listens to your plants the way others listen to music, someone who senses that nature holds answers we've forgotten. Today, I want to take you on a journey into one of the oldest garden secrets ever buried. A plant that ancient growers relied on not just for food, but for clarity, resilience, and even emotional strength. In a noisy digital age, when many of us garden to quiet our minds, this lost green companion may have more to offer than we ever imagined. If you love discovering forgotten wisdom from the soil, make sure to subscribe to Golden Garden and ring the bell so you never miss a story nature has been waiting to tell. Yo, 1. The plant we buried and the brain we forgot, for those of us who spend our mornings checking on new buds or gently brushing soil from a leaf, it's easy to feel that plants communicate in quiet ways. And yet there is one plant we collectively pushed out of our gardens as if forgetting it would make the world simpler. But the truth is, we didn't just bury a crop. We buried a kind of nourishment our minds have been craving. This ancient bean once grew beside simple cottages, thriving in humble earth just like the flowers and herbs many of you tend today. Gardeners, people like you who find comfort in routine watering, pruning, watching life unfold, once relied on this plant not only to fill their pantry, but to steady their thoughts and lift the heavy days. Imagine that. A food born from the soil offering the same clarity we now chase with pills, caffeine, or frantic schedules. As modern life demands more of our energy and focus, many gardeners feel a quiet fatigue, a sense that the mind is overstimulated yet somehow underfed. And perhaps that feeling isn't a flaw in us, but a signal, a reminder that something essential was removed from our plates, our gardens, and eventually our memory. Now, as more of us return to the soil seeking calm and grounding, the story of this forgotten plant gently rises back to the surface. 2. Unearthing the oldest seeds, rewriting the timeline of a forgotten crop. When we trace this plant back through history, the story doesn't lead us to a modern lab or a dusty textbook. It leads us deep into the earth, into a quiet archaeological site where time itself seemed to pause. Imagine standing in Galilee, where researchers uncovered clay vessels sealed for nearly 10,000 years. Inside them, perfectly preserved, were the seeds of the very plant our ancestors trusted long before they knew the names of nutrients or neurotransmitters. For gardeners like you, who treasure heirloom varieties, who feel connected to generations before you through the act of planting, this discovery feels almost spiritual. These ancient farmers had no metal tools, no written language, yet they chose this bean as one of the very first crops to cultivate. Not wheat, not barley, but a plant that offered strength during winter, resilience during hardship, and a kind of mental clarity they didn't have words for. And as we look at today's world filled with overstimulation and quiet exhaustion, it's almost poetic. It's as if those seeds were waiting for us, protected by time, ready to remind modern gardeners that some of the answers we seek were planted thousands of years ago and never truly lost. 3. A global journey before globalization ever existed. As these ancient seeds took root, they didn't stay confined to one valley or one tribe. They traveled, quietly, steadily, carried by the hands of early growers who understood their value without needing a single scientific explanation. Long before ships charted oceans or trade routes stitched continents together, this humble bean was already moving across the world, appearing in Spain, Greece, and even the cool landscapes of Switzerland. For many of you who love sharing cuttings with neighbors or trading seeds with friends across gardening groups, this part of the story might feel familiar. Our ancestors formed their own kind of network long before the internet connected us. They passed along the plants that fed them, healed them, and gave them resilience through the hardest seasons. And the people who received these beans didn't treat them as ordinary food. They believed the plant carried spiritual weight, something that touched both the body and the unseen parts of the mind. It's the same instinct many of today's gardeners feel when they step into their backyard after a long, stressful day. A quiet understanding that some plants don't just nourish us, they steady us. And this ancient traveler was one of them. Therefore, ancient medicine, even without the word dopamine. As this bean spread across early civilizations, it quietly earned a reputation far greater than that of an ordinary crop. The Egyptians placed it in tombs to nourish souls on their journey beyond life. The Romans served it during festivals honoring the dead, believing it opened a doorway between worlds, and medieval healers praised it for its ability to lift heavy moods when winter shadows settled over the mind. What's incredible is that none of these people knew the word dopamine. They didn't understand brain chemistry or neurotransmitters. Yet they recognized something every gardener senses deep down, that certain plants affect us in ways we can't fully explain but absolutely feel. Many of you who tend small gardens at home know this truth intimately. You feel calmer after pruning, more focused after watering, more grounded when your hands touch the soil. Our ancestors felt the same, and they turned to this bean not only to fill their bowls but to steady their hearts and brighten their thoughts. They couldn't measure molecules, but they observed transformation. And sometimes that kind of knowledge passed through generations of growers is more powerful than science itself. 5. When science finally caught up and pharma took over, centuries later, long after these ancient gardeners had vanished, science finally stepped into the story. In 1913, a researcher named Marcus Guggenheim isolated a mysterious compound from this humble bean, something he didn't yet understand but knew was powerful. Decades passed before scientists realized this molecule, L-DOPA, could transform directly into dopamine inside the human brain, a discovery that would reshape modern medicine. But here's where the story takes a turn many gardeners will recognize. Instead of celebrating the plant that held this gift, the world shifted its attention to the laboratory. Companies learned how to bottle the molecule, sell it, and turn it into an industry. And slowly, the bean that once supported entire civilizations was pushed aside, treated as irrelevant, too simple, too common, too ancient. For those of you who grow your own herbs, greens, and vegetables because you believe nature still has answers, this moment feels familiar. We live in an age where solutions are expected to come from pharmacies, not from soil, where healing is packaged, priced, and marketed. Yet the very plant that made this medicine possible remained right there in the earth, waiting. And while science raced ahead, the garden quietly kept its wisdom intact. Cetex, when comfort made us forget, the era of erasure. As the world grew wealthier and daily life became more comfortable, something unexpected happened. We turned away from the very foods that had sustained us for thousands of years. By the 18th century, as meat and dairy filled the tables of rising societies, this ancient bean was quietly pushed to the margins. It became labeled as poor man's food, a relic of harder times, unworthy of modern kitchens. For many gardeners today, this shift feels strangely familiar. How often have we watched resilient heirloom plants replaced by glossy supermarket varieties? How often have we seen simple, nourishing crops dismissed as old-fashioned, while fragile hybrids take their place? In our rush toward convenience, we forget the wisdom woven into traditional plants, the ones that fed our grandparents, restored the soil, and strengthened communities. In places like Britain, where this bean had supported people for 5 millennia, it vanished from dinner tables almost overnight. What once symbolized sustenance and balance was reduced to animal feed. And with its disappearance, something subtle but vital went missing from our diets and from our minds. Yet, just like many of the forgotten plants gardeners revive today, this bean did not truly vanish. It lingered quietly in old fields, in dusty seed boxes, in stories whispered by elders, waiting patiently for someone to remember its worth. Chapter 7. The Modern Mind in Crisis, What We Lost. When the bean disappeared. As the old crops faded from our plates, a quieter crisis began to grow. One not of hunger, but of the mind. In the last few decades, rates of depression, anxiety, dopamine deficiency, and Parkinson's disease have climbed sharply. Doctors wrote prescriptions faster than ever, yet many people still felt a lingering fog, a lack of motivation, a sense that something was missing and they couldn't quite name it. Gardeners, perhaps more than anyone, feel this gap deeply. Many of you turn to your plants as a refuge from the exhaustion of modern life. You step outside to breathe, to reset, to feel grounded in a world that moves too fast. And somewhere deep inside, you sense what science is finally beginning to recognize. The foods that once supported our brain, foods rich in natural dopamine precursors, have slowly vanished from our daily lives. While processed meals filled the shelves, nature's original brain food was pushed aside. The very plant that once helped ancient people through dark winters and emotional heaviness disappeared just when the modern world needed it most. And as more gardeners search for balance, clarity, and a return to simplicity, the absence of this forgotten crop becomes impossible to ignore. It's as if our minds are sending a message, urging us to look back to what the soil once freely gave. 8. The comeback we didn't expect when fresh fava outperformed the pill. Then, almost quietly, the story shifted again. In the early 2000s, researchers began testing something surprisingly simple. What would happen if people consumed the bean itself, rather than the synthetic version of its famous compound? And the results caught everyone off guard. Fresh fava beans, those same seeds ancient farmers trusted, raised L-dopa levels in the bloodstream at rates similar to standard medication. In some cases, the effects even lasted longer. For gardeners like you who understand that whole foods carry a kind of harmony no capsule can imitate, this discovery makes perfect sense. A plant isn't just a single molecule. It's a symphony of nutrients, enzymes, and natural cofactors working together the way nature intended. When grown in healthy soil and harvested at the right moment, it delivers its gifts slowly, steadily, in a way the body seems to recognize. People reported longer stretches of ease, moments when movement felt smoother, thoughts felt lighter, and motivation returned. These were the same benefits the ancients described in their own language, long before modern science gave them names. And suddenly a crop once dismissed as outdated reemerged as something astonishingly relevant. It was as if the earth had been quietly keeping score, waiting for us to rediscover what it had offered all along. 9. The science of a garden plant, how one bean nourishes the mind. When scientists looked deeper into this ancient crop, they discovered something remarkable. Its natural L-dopa can do what very few compounds in the world can: cross the blood-brain barrier. Once inside, it transforms directly into dopamine, the neurotransmitter that fuels motivation, focus, and emotional resilience. In other words, this humble garden plant nourishes the very pathways that help us feel clear and alive. For many home gardeners, this connection feels almost poetic. You spend your days tending leaves, watching new growth form, breathing in the scent of living soil, and somehow you feel lighter afterward, clearer. Part of that peace comes from the act of gardening itself, but part of it also comes from the plants we choose to grow. Some of them, like this bean, were once staples in diets because they offered more than calories. They supported the mind in ways people could feel even if they couldn't explain it. Modern research also shows that inflammation, especially in the frontal lobe, can drain dopamine and lead to depression or mental fatigue. And here again, nature seems one step ahead. This bean, rich in bioactive compounds, has shown potential not only to boost dopamine, but also to support long-term brain health. It's a reminder that sometimes the answers we chase in complex science are rooted in something far simpler, a plant that's been waiting for us to remember its power. Chapter 10, Growing the Forgotten Brain in Food, bringing the bean back to our gardens. Now that we know what this ancient plant can offer, the next question is simple: how do we grow it again? And the answer might surprise you. This isn't a fragile, demanding crop. It's a survivor, one that actually prefers the cold seasons most crops fear. While many plants wait for spring warmth, this bean stretches its roots into winter soil, pushing through frost with a determination gardeners deeply admire. For those of you who love experimenting with hardy plants, this is where the magic begins. You sow the seeds when the garden seems asleep, late fall, early winter, or anytime the ground isn't frozen solid. 2 inches deep is enough to protect them from ice and wind. And while other plants retreat, this one gets to work underground, building a root system that will burst to life the moment daylight grows long again. There's something beautifully symbolic here for modern gardeners. Just as many of us plant to cope with stress or to find a sense of purpose during difficult seasons, this bean thrives in the harsh months, reminding us that strength often grows in the quiet, unseen places. And when spring finally arrives, it rewards your patience with sturdy green shoots ready to nourish both soil and spirit. It's a plant that asks little, yet gives back more than you'd expect. 11. The soil healing secret. How this bean restores the ground beneath us. As this resilient plant pushes upward, it quietly performs another miracle, one that every gardener, from balcony growers to backyard farmers, can appreciate. Beneath the surface, its roots form a partnership with beneficial bacteria, naturally pulling nitrogen from the air and locking it into the soil. This process, invisible yet powerful, transforms tired earth into rich, fertile ground without the need for store-bought fertilizers. For those of you who cherish sustainable gardening, who love seeing your soil grow darker and more alive each season, this plant feels like a gift. After a winter of quietly working underground, it leaves behind a boost of nutrients that your next crops will thrive on. Tomatoes grow fuller, corn stands taller, squashy. Beans sprawl with newfound energy. It's like preparing a feast for the plants that come after, a gesture of generosity woven into its very nature. And there's something deeply meaningful about that. Many gardeners turn to the earth not just to grow food or flowers, but to rebuild themselves, to find grounding, healing, and balance. This bean mirrors that journey. It restores what's been depleted, enriches what's been overlooked, and strengthens what's been worn down. By planting it, you're not just cultivating a crop, you're rejuvenating the heart of your garden. And in many ways, it returns the favor by rejuvenating something inside you as well. 12. The loss technique, the simple pinch that transforms the harvest. As spring turns to early summer, this ancient bean begins to rise tall and proud. But with new height comes a familiar garden challenge. Aphids, those tiny sap-loving insects, are irresistibly drawn to the plant's tender top growth. Yet long before pesticides existed, cottage gardeners had already discovered a brilliantly simple solution, one that feels almost too easy to be real. They called it the pinch. When the first pods begin forming lower on the stem, you gently remove the top few inches of the plant. Just a quick pinch between your fingers, nothing elaborate, nothing forceful. And with that one small action, you eliminate the aphid's favorite feeding spot while redirecting the plant's energy downward, swelling the pods and concentrating the harvest. For gardeners who love practical wisdom passed down through generations, this technique feels like uncovering treasure. It reminds us that not every problem needs a chemical spray or a complicated fix. Sometimes the answer is as simple as paying attention, trusting the plant, and stepping in at just the right moment. And there's a beautiful lesson here too. When we trim away what drains us, whether in our gardens or our lives, we make room for better growth. The plant becomes stronger, more productive, more focused, and in its quiet way, it teaches us to do the same. 13. Rediscovering how to eat it. From ancient fuel to modern brain food. When harvest time arrives, many people make the same mistake our ancestors never did. They boil these beans until they lose their color, their texture, and most of their gifts. But if you look back at how ancient growers prepared them, you'll find a very different story. They roasted them over open flames, crushed them with herbs, or enjoyed them young and tender while the pods were still bright green. For home gardeners who love turning fresh produce into nourishing meals, this is where the magic truly unfolds. Young fava beans, lightly roasted with olive oil and a sprinkle of sea salt, become crisp golden bites packed with natural L-dopa. Blended with garlic and fresh cilantro, they transform into a vibrant spread, earthy, creamy, and incredibly alive. Even the young leaves and shoots can be sautéed like spinach, offering yet another layer of flavor from a single plant. Eating them this way feels different, it feels intentional. You can almost sense the connection between the garden's rhythm and your body's needs. And suddenly, this ancient bean shifts from peasant food to something far more valuable, a brain-supporting, energy-lifting, deeply satisfying food that loves you back. It reminds us that sometimes the most powerful nourishment isn't found on a store shelf, but right in the garden you tend with your own hands. 14. Respecting the plant's power, a wisdom our ancestors never ignored. Even with all its gifts, this ancient bean carries a reminder that nature's most powerful remedies must be approached with respect. Thousands of years ago, healers and philosophers noticed that while the plant helped many, a small number of people reacted very differently. Today we know why. A genetic condition called G6PD deficiency can trigger a dangerous reaction when these beans are eaten. For gardeners who love sharing their harvest with friends and neighbors, this is important to remember. It doesn't mean the plant is dangerous, it simply means it holds a strength that must be handled with awareness. Much like growing a medicinal herb or caring for a plant with potent oils, knowing who can safely enjoy it is part of the wisdom that comes with gardening. Even Pythagoras centuries ago warned certain followers to avoid the bean, not out of superstition but out of a deep respect for its power. And that ancient caution still matters today. If someone has the deficiency, the rule is simple: avoid it completely. But for everyone else, this plant remains a remarkable gift, offering both nourishment and mental clarity. In a world that often treats food as harmless or identical, this bean reminds us that real plants carry real potency, and that caring for them, like caring for ourselves, begins with understanding. 15. From ancient fields to the future, why this bean may shape tomorrow. As incredible as its past may be, the story of this ancient bean doesn't end in history books. It reaches straight into our future. Today, scientists at NASA are studying it as a top candidate for space missions, recognizing its unique combination of high protein, soil-enhancing abilities, and the psychological comfort it can offer to astronauts facing the lonely stretch of deep space. A plant once grown in simple clay fields may one day feed humans on Mars. For gardeners who dream about sustainability and self-reliance, this reveals something profound. Universities across Europe are now uncovering new compounds within the bean, bioactives that may protect brain cells, strengthen neural pathways, and perhaps even slow the progression of degenerative conditions. It seems that as technology advances, we're finally beginning to value the very crops our ancestors trusted without question. And for home gardeners, balcony growers, and backyard caretakers, there's something beautiful in this full-circle moment. A plant that once nourished ancient families, traveled across early civilizations, and restored exhausted soil is now being recognized as a key to human resilience, both emotional and physical. It reminds us that the future of health may not lie solely in laboratories or pills, but in the simple act of planting a seed. A seed that has waited thousands of years for us to remember its strength and to bring it back into our gardens once more. The wisdom rooted in the soil. Throughout this journey, we've uncovered a truth many gardeners feel in their hearts long before science confirms it. Nature remembers what we forget. This ancient bean, once trusted by civilizations who lived closer to the earth, now returns to us in a time when our minds are weary, our diets are hollow, and our connection to the soil feels more important than ever. For those of you who find peace in pruning, who breathe easier among your plants, who turn to the garden when life grows too loud, this story is a reminder that the answers we seek are often already growing quietly beneath our feet. As you look over your beds and pots, imagine how something so simple, one seed pressed into cool soil, can nourish both the earth and the mind. This plant does more than feed us. It rebuilds what is depleted, enriches what is tired, and reminds us that strength often grows in silence. And perhaps most importantly, it shows that ancient wisdom still matters, even in a digital age. If this story sparked curiosity or opened something inside you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you grown this bean before? Would you try it now? Share your experience in the comments. I read everyone. And if you want more journeys like this into the forgotten wisdom of our gardens, make sure to follow Golden Garden, leave a like, and subscribe so you never miss the next story waiting in the soil.